Prime Minister Anthony Albanese is still flying high in the polls, but if you look closer, he is now struggling. Now, on Saturday, he demeaned the office of Prime Minister by going to the wedding of crass Sydney shock-jock Kyle Sandilands, whose other guests of honour were prominent underworld figure John Ibrahim and jailed drug smuggler Simon Mayne. Yes, Albanese may have hidden behind Sandilands' son to make it all seem very innocent, but why on earth was he there? Now, it's not as if he's friends with Sandilands, a gross loudmouth famous for having a 14-year-old listener sit a lie detector test on air and tell us about her rape. He's the kind of guy who today announced that he had sex with his new wife on his wedding day.
We've got your beautiful wedding speech to Tegan.
Oh, and a lot of people asking, did you consummate the marriage? You bet your ass.
Now, Albanese going to the wedding was not about friendship, it was about power. Sandilands is the top-rating radio station star in Sydney, and Albanese needs to reach his audience of amoral young Australians who are up for that kind of rubbish. And Sandilands, in turn, wants Albanese there to project himself as a man of influence. But our Prime Minister hobnobbing with that lot and swanking around a rich social climber's wedding costing $1 million when working-class Australians are right now doing it so tough. And spending 7 hours at this wedding when he spent only half that time at Alice Springs to try to fix an Aboriginal dysfunction, which again erupted into this violence over the weekend. So how does all that look? Our Prime Minister lending himself out to the likes of Sandilands' mates as some kind of trophy wedding guest, a little puppet on the wedding cake. I mean, today another misstep as well. Albanese marched with his union mates in Brisbane for May Day.
And I'm proud to be marching with my union today, the AMWU, and the union movement of Queensland.
Again, not great when his government's already dangerously close to the union movement. It's been going soft on the lawless CFMEU building union. It's been stacking Fair Work Australia with 2 former union officials. And later in the parade, Albanese was actually heckled as he marched behind a banner, yet again flogging his campaign for a racist voice to Parliament, kind of advisory Parliament, just for Aborigines. And that on the day when one of the lawyers advising Albanese's working group on the voice admitted to a Senate committee it could actually make government unworkable.
And to constitutionalise it is to risk that in the future that could clog the system of government.
Meanwhile, Albanese's government is running out of money because he just can't stop spending, and he doesn't have the courage to cut anything in the budget next week, as he today admitted.
There are no cuts in the budget in 8 days' time. All the funding that had been allocated is still there.
Now, the government did apparently want to cut some infrastructure projects because of rising costs, but the state said no, so the government announced yet another review instead into which projects are in fact in strife. Albanese used it to blast past Liberal governments.
The former government was obsessed with pork barrelling. What we've been obsessed with is delivering productivity-enhancing projects.
Hang on, your government is spending our money on what?
Productivity-enhancing projects.
Productivity-enhancing projects. Really? Because in fact, Albanese just last weekend announced he'd spend $220 million, your money, on a new football stadium in Hobart and another $65 million on a stadium at Launceston, although some locals heckled him because they wanted cheap housing instead. So, why is Albanese spending all this money on stadiums for the AFL when his government is heading to a $1 trillion debt? Because this sure isn't a productivity enhancement project, sitting on your backside watching football. Well, it actually looks like Albanese paying the AFL to now urge all AFL clubs to consider backing his campaign for The Voice, which they did a couple of days ago. But if Albanese really, really wanted to cut useless projects, I tell you, he could start by cancelling the $2.2 billion he promised the broke Victorian Labor government for its White Elephant suburban rail loop. now estimated to cost an insane $200 billion plus. That's 4 times more than first promised. Meanwhile, Australians are finding it almost impossible to find affordable homes to rent, and one big reason for that is Albanese's government again. It let in more than 400,000 immigrants over the past year and has now admitted we're getting 715,000 more over the next 2 years. That's nearly twice the population of Canberra in 2 years. Now, I could go on. This government is making you poorer. You just look at its crazy global warming policies. That's going to make your power prices even higher. So, a poorer country, divided by race and led by a Prime Minister trawling for votes at a wedding starring an underworld kingpin and a drug smuggler. I mean, God save Australia.